Venture is not sitting in a nice office with borrowed power of LPs and playing like in old Caesar's times, thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm not so keen of building portfolios. If I find cool companies that make a difference, that is where the beef is. And if you have one or two of them, every portfolio looks great. I do believe that if you see the right company, you should take a lot of risk and overproportional risk in those.
Are you price sensitive, Klaus?
Absolutely not.
Ready to go? Klaus, I am so excited for this. I've wanted to make this one happen for quite a few years, so thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. So to finally, after that long years, the wait was worth it because you have become an icon. So now I'm the underdog here.
Well, I mean, flattery will get you everywhere, but I want to start with a crucial first question, which is one that I haven't phrased quite like this before. Adidas or Puma, and how did Puma lead to the start of your investing journey?
Wow, so you obviously did your homework. This is a very crucial question. So not in terms of the sport shoes, obviously, and as a Swiss German, I should say that is on, but as a life lesson. Yeah, Puma made a very big impact, and I guess that you always have like 2 or 3 of those in your life. And Puma was the halo moment for me. So as you know, I grew up in the German countryside, hence my crazy accent here. And it was close to Mönchengladbach, and I was the son of a farmer. So at 16, 17, 18, I knew a lot about how to work in the fields and do all this nasty work that nobody ever wants to do in that age. But I was lucky that my grandma wanted me to hate banks. Yeah, and the way she thought about it was, look, I give you $20,000 and you buy stocks. If you gain something, it's yours. If you lose it, I cover it. And she thought I go to the local saving and loan bank, get a bad stock recommendation, lose the money, and I'm mad at the bank. But as it turns out, my affinity for football in Mönchengladbach was that they played in Puma shoes, and Puma did the IPO. And I said, look, grandma takes the losses so I can go in fully leveraged. And at the time I was making $10 pocket money a month. I made 100,000 with Puma in 3 months. So I said, look, 2 phone calls, 100 years of pocket money, I become an investor. So, and at that moment, the sail was set for what I wanted to be in the future.
What did your grandmother say?
So she obviously was delighted, also for the wrong reason, so to say. I still did a banking apprenticeship, so that she probably disliked, but she thankfully lived long enough to be able to see how part of the story develops.
Can I ask, did you ever go through a trough of disillusionment, so to speak? And what I mean by that is, like, as a young investor, make a series of mistakes early in the career that lead you to question whether you are a good investor. I think there's a lot of investors today who are sitting there going, gosh, 21 was a boom time. My numbers look great. Am I still a good investor?
Well, yes, I think that was the other purpose. Of course, I lost the money afterwards. And that was probably her real mission with it, so that you lose the money and make the lessons when you don't have a lot of money. Because when you are young and lose a little bit, which is still everything you have, is as painful as if you lose a lot when you are older. So this has been a very, very thoughtful lesson for me. So I had a rule for long that when I had an exceptional hit, I would stop investing for 3 months, because success makes you fear that you can walk over water. And you needed to force yourself to have these humbling moments to say, oh, no, that was luck. Yeah, keep cool, and don't make silly mistakes now.
It's so interesting you say that about kind of when you have success, you pause. Because I actually think when you have success, maybe that is the time as an early stage investor to double down more than ever. I often think, are richer investors better investors? Because you're not afraid of downside. You see the beauty in Spotify, in Revolut, in Helsing, and you don't see the many reasons that many people say no.
Well, not sure. So I think there's a difference between a lot of different genre of investors. Yeah? So there are people that have a lot of money that if they have successes and think there's a momentum market, they pour a lot of money in the market, but for very different reasons. I'm always intrigued by the technology or by the founder. And this doesn't scale with money so much. And it has to be that final moment, and the special moment, because I do want to fall in love with the founder and the business, because at the end I look at myself as an outsourced business development guy. And so I do spend a lot of time, so I do need to like everything with it.
Why are you an outsourced business development guy, Klaus?
Because that's what venture is. Venture is not sitting in a nice office with borrowed power of LPs and playing like in old Caesar's times, thumbs up, thumbs down. So no, I think the entrepreneur is the star because he has a single asset risk and he is super passionate for one idea and for with this idea, advancing society. And I'm just a feature to increase the odds that he succeeds.
When you get a pick on an entrepreneur wrong, what is it that you don't see?
Good question. I don't know. It is always very different. So what I really, really despise is vanity. So there is a high correlation between people that post a lot or tweet a lot or whatever, using social media a lot, and efficiency. So that has always been, I think this for VCs similar than for entrepreneurs themselves. But it's implicit sometimes, So it's also, mistakes aren't bad by design. You just need to understand and find a rule that you can avoid the same mistakes. And so if I wasn't set up to have certain mistakes, I would also not get into the companies that finally make it.
Klaus, for me, these shows are like why I love what I do, because to me, you're in most respectful way like a wise elder of venture that I can learn from. And
Methusalem.
The challenge that I have, though, is on the founder side, we've seen the industry so transactionalized where founders say, Klaus, I want Lakestar, thank you, but I'm deciding on Friday. And you have a much shorter time to build a relationship, to build conviction in a founder. How do you embrace and feel about that transactionalization?
So first of all, I do not get involved in a lot of companies. So, and I'm totally fine if a founder rejects it for some reason, because there's young and in most cases young, and there are a lot of new things coming to him at the same time, and it's very difficult to get them into a certain chronology. And at the end, I might have also made a bad job in promoting what I can contribute. So on the flip side, for me, it is way more satisfying to see that those top entrepreneurs that I've backed, I've always, when they did the second business, I was always allowed to be one of the leading investors, be it with the sum up or with Neko or with other businesses.
The other question I had is, like you mentioned there, like the frequency of tweeting and posting and how that correlates. Ventures become, I don't know how else to say it, a marketing business above everything else, with venture investors tweeting, writing, doing podcasts, believe it or not, doing video series. We've all become content creators. How do you feel about the evolution of venture where we all have to bluntly sell our wares being our cash?
I do believe that, that's always how I've done it. So if you have a certain mission and the mission requires you to be a little bit more outspoken or to reach a broader audience, then I think this is a perfect methodology to do this. So then, because you cannot achieve that aim in a different way. But what you are alluding to and what I'm despising is the self-promotion stuff. So thinking, oh, look, I'm a cool entrepreneur. And for them, entrepreneur means sitting in Soho House in Berlin with an avocado toast and a cappuccino and thinking we rule the world. And then just in the afternoon thinking of some random entrepreneur say, hey, great, thankful to be part of the journey. So this is something where I say, look, geez, there's so much more urgent things to do for a VC than doing those kind of things.
Can I ask, on a macro level, how do you think venture is more misunderstood today? If that's on a micro, where it's like, it's not about avocado toast and cappuccinos and thrilled to back, Klaus. On a macro level, how is it misunderstood?
So the macro level, it's pretty simple. For me, the progress of a society is the way how they can handle risk. And entire Europe has had societal and economical progress, especially in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we were basically very good at financing innovation at the magnitude of 4% of GDP. So the banks financed it because they were in a regulatory framework where they were allowed to do these kind of investments. And the innovation at that time was Bosch, Siemens, Porsche, you name it. So today, the regulation has changed. Banks do not finance innovation and startups anymore. And today, the only regulatorily compliant way of financing innovation is venture. And in Europe, we are at 0.5% of GDP. So we are under-financing innovation by factor 8 in comparison to the levels that made us wealthy in the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Two kind of spin-offs there. One, do you think then that we should have banks and government institutions filling that hole and doing the 3.5% to meet us at the 4%?
Look, at the earlier stages, that doesn't work. So if you discuss with banks, this is a rather complex discussion always. Yeah? So I think they have not been trained and experienced in this kind of financing, and the banking side is the wrong one. But we should get our equations straight, meaning we cannot expect to create wealth in the way we have created if we are under financing the reasons why we created that wealth by factor 8. So this will probably not work.
I don't feel like we are under-financing innovation in Europe. When you look at deal cycles, when you look at deal pricing, when you look at quality of deals, I think we have dramatically too few good companies for the amount of cash that we have, which is why we're seeing the exorbitant prices that we are in Europe. Am I wrong?
I think this, what you're describing, is a cyclical element to it. And there is no doubt that we do need to finance innovation, and there will always be phases of more liquidity, of exuberated pricing, and the pendulum always swings between the left and the right. So, and if you think about the fact that basically from a start where we accompany a company until we exit, it is easy 8 to 10 years if you really want to make sure you get all the value creation. All of the phenomena that you would be describing will happen at least once, in the lifetime of that company. So this is something where I'm not concerned. Structurally, there is a lot of signs that the world has changed a lot. If you think about the 2000s and early 2010s, there were no technical founders. So and I thought lengthily about the fact, why is that? Because we had the copycat nations where the Samba brothers built the machine rocket internet. But this was basically an absence of technical innovation. And the reason was an interesting one, at least the one that I thought was a plausible one, is that at that time, in continental Europe, very few people that had an affinity to technology, they had economics at school. So they were basically really afraid of becoming self-employed. So, and if you see the first German value-added tax declaration that you need to do as an entrepreneur, that can be pretty intimidating. So basically, I even have sympathy for that. So this has thankfully all changed. If you now look at ETH or the Technical University Munich or the KTH in Stockholm, the quality of the founders is very, very different. You barely have any copycats anymore. You really have genuine technological innovation and ideas.
The quality of technical talent is there. The quality of local liquidity markets has gone through the floor. Like the LSE, I mean, I don't actually ever remember it being good. Bluntly, I'm too young. But I mean, now it's terrible. I don't think, the German stock market's hugely better. I don't think Amsterdam's hugely better either. I mean, Bill Ackman's running away faster than anyone from, whatever it is, Euronext. Like, how much of a problem is the lack of liquidity markets in Europe?
You can answer it in a little broader scope. How much is, especially in continental Europe, the financial illiteracy a problem? So basically, you see it at politicians, you see it in a lot of instances. We are not thinking the same way, what can you do with money that the US does it? And also, so my weirdest moment, it's a funny anecdote also, is when we had the SPAC and we listed it in Frankfurt. So, and then I was speaking to the CEO of Frankfurt Stock Exchange and said, look, this is cool. Can we have this photo? Because the founders are really, really proud. And this is the culmination of their journey so far. And he said, yeah, we can do that. But there's a price list for that. And I said, what do you mean there's a price list? Yeah, we are doing sort of an advertisement that this IPO is happening at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. He said, no, the price list is, make a guess, for the photo.
400 euros? I mean,
400,000 euros. Just for the photo. And what we did is we did a CGI of the interior of the Deutsche Börse and put it on a tapestry in our office. And then we stood there, had our own bell and rang it, and it looked 100% authentically, but we did really not want to pay the 400,000 bucks. And I spoke to the Deutsche Börse and said, guys, it's fine to have a business model. It's also fine to take a certain margin over a lifetime of a quotation, but don't tax people at the highest emotional moment when they are so proud to go to the stock exchange. So this is what I mean with culture. So it is still something awkward.
I mean, that's absolutely nuts. So they're having Michelangelo take the photo. What can we do that the US does? You said there, we don't get financial literacy like the US does. We don't do it the way the US does. What does Europe not do that the US does?
So in terms of, first of all, I think we do suffer the different aspects of the heterogeneity of our continent. Yeah, so there is no point in having 3 stock exchanges, because at the end liquidity is everything, and we should basically say.
So we should have a European stock exchange.
Yes, we should. Yeah. So there was an attempt. Yeah, but it was blocked by politicians. So it's still a little bit like a regional egoism. Yeah. So which is understandable, but which basically is part of the problem. Yeah. So the second one is we do not have deep capital pools. So, I mean, when you think about a huge step was in 1974 when you had the ERISA Act. Yeah, so that pension funds in the US were to invest in venture funds. So, and this made a big difference. And we don't do this in Europe. So I think the most pension funds invest according to the endowment model in the US, meaning you get basically a venture allocation of 10 to 13% plus, and the European pension funds invest 0.02% in venture. So, and this is, first of all, it's already shocking because the numbers in the US, it's not that the risk has risen, it is that also the return has overproportionally risen. And if you think about it in a different way, basically if you forced, and I'm very careful with the word forced, you have to force pension funds to do it. Yeah? Because then you would get a way higher return, which makes a huge difference for the pension, on the buying power a pensioner has. So, for example, if you have a normal worker that pays in €1,000 a month at the age of 20 something, and when he is 64, with a German pension fund, he has 750,000 bucks. In an American one, 3.5 million, just because of compounding of higher yielding assets. So meaning, we all say we have problems with the retirement system. So this is a very easy fix. We are just in 2 conservative asset classes. But at the same time, this money being unlocked from the pension schemes would solve the entire problem of financing innovation. And the best, you would solve 2 problems and nobody had to pay for that, except one politician needed to tackle this problem, and they all are very afraid to touch anything that has to do with retirement.
You mentioned that kind of the inclusion of pension funds being more active in venture funds. My worry, and then I promise we will get back to schedule, my worry is that, respectfully, they need to write such large checks, 100 million plus in the US's case for some of the largest pension funds. They are investing, respectfully, in immensely large funds that everyone in the business knows will do at best 2x. At best. They are enormous, the 3, 4, 5 plus $billion funds. And bluntly, they're not very good. They're not great assets.
I think yes and no, but it's still a luxury problem because we're coming from a world where the life insurers are discussing that they could not even provide the 2-3% minimum yield. Yeah, or for the pensioners. So I mean, even if you're a mediocre fund, and do 2x, this is on a logarithmic scale in a different orbit to what we currently have.
Are you worried by the lack of liquidity in venture today on a more broad scale? We've seen M&A and IPO at its lowest level since the last 20 years.
No. So it's always better if we have it, but it will come back at some point. And good companies are always worth something, and there are always a lot of people be willing to engage with them. There's always an exit market for them. So I'm relaxed because at the end everything boils down to the qualities of the assets, and then you mitigate a lot of these risks.
So I want to dive into the quality of the assets element there, and the assets themselves, being in this case defense. Specifically, when we spoke before, and when I had a founder actually of Andrew on the show before, he was fascinating. He was like, no, defense is not a category. You can't build a portfolio around defense. Really, the Anduril of X is just Anduril. Do you agree that it is not a large enough category to build a venture portfolio around?
No, I don't. Yeah. So it's not. It is. It will become anyways. Yeah. So look, my famous quote always is when Uber started in San Francisco, people said, but the taxi market is only 250 million. And today Uber's revenue in San Francisco is 600 million. So, and if you do the math on defense, which we can do a little bit later, you will see there's massive money coming into it, creating this market and creating a lot of opportunities there. But at the same time, I'm not so keen of building portfolios. If I find cool companies that make a difference, that is where the beef is. And if you have one or two of them, every portfolio looks great. Yeah, and there's a lot of things you don't know about the market, and we have to work very much in building the ecosystem. Hence my willingness and drive to serve as the chairman of the NATO Innovation Fund to exactly build this ecosystem.
Why do you not like the idea of portfolios? For many people brought up in the last 10 years, it's what venture is built around. And, early stage, you're told 20 to 40 is the right number for the right levels of diversification. And there's the standard portfolio tropes. Why do you?
It's a mean to an end. You have to build portfolios in order to get money from institutional investors. But on the way there, you make a lot of concessions. So you have to think about how much do I reserve per company? Am I at some point shot out? Or can I reuse proceeds to get to a pretty high investment grade? Because if you do 3 times the money, but if you have 100 minus 20% over 10 years management fee, that's 80 times 3, it's 240. But if you have a 100% investment grade, because you can use proceeds, then 3 times is 300. So you see, this has nothing to do with any company. That's just trying to please the framework around the rules of deployment, so to say. And I think this is something we need to obey to, because we do need this money, but this is for me something that has nothing to do with investing. So, and if you find the cool companies, this is basically what I'm intrigued by.
I remember Brian Singerman at Founders Fund is a friend of mine, and he once told me that Founders Fund's great performance lies in the truth, but that fundamentally they do not have capital constraints on a per company basis, which means they can concentrate huge amounts of money into the same company. How do you feel about capital constraints on a per company basis?
Look, I don't know if I should pride myself for that, but at least I am regularly asking my very understanding investment advisory board to be a little bit more generous on these rules. Yeah, so I do believe that if you see the right company, you should take a lot of risk and overproportional risk in those.
Listen, part of a venture portfolio, whether we like it or not, and building it is kind of an element of why now. Why is a company more exciting today than it was in prior years? Specifically around defense, I want to dive into in what ways is the perceived risk from Russia worsening, and how is support for joint defense in NATO changing?
So there's a variety of things here. So first of all, I would not necessarily categorize it as defense investing. At the end, it is all it's deep tech, and one customer emerges, and that are the MODs. And there's a very good reason for that, because suddenly you are forced to think a little bit more about the technical sovereignty, about a capacity to defend yourself. Yeah? And the limitations are in the classical equipment. You cannot you build it or buy it so quickly because there are limitations in that. And secondly, the way the efficiency works on the different technology versus established equipment is very, very different. You have a 1,000 euro drone that takes us a 10 million tank. You have a 500,000 submarine, unmanned, which can take out a 500 million submarine, the classical one. And the same for basically every category. So there's a huge shift, and the Ministry of Defense need to see, where do I allocate? And deep tech can make a big difference in these kind of mechanics. And so that's why we are very committed at NATO level to invest in technologies that enhance the defense capacity of the NATO member states.
So when we think about enhancing defense capacity, when we chatted before, you said when it comes to defense, we need to make the electorate understand how bad the situation is. What do you think we most need to understand that we don't understand?
There has been a long time of the peace dividend, so to say. Yeah, I mean, me included, I had never thought that we would get to this kind of a situation where we see a war on Europe territory, and if it then comes to the fact that we seriously need to think about being able to self-defend ourselves, then you start to make up the mass. So what has been achieved? What did we do in the ministries of defense? And some numbers are very misleading. So, for example, everybody says, but Russia has the capacity or the economic power of something between Portugal and Spain. But in terms of purchase power parity, they're spending more on defense than the entire NATO member states. And for me, these kind of things happen gradually, more with facts of observation. So for me, it was not, or still very difficult to see that an entire continent is depending on availability of internet. If Elon Musk with Starlink has a good day, and if he has a bad day, he shuts it down. And this is basically what defines an availability of a certain technology. I think for a continent, this is too poor. There needs to be a consistent strategy how we basically level ourselves up in terms of our capacity there.
Does Germany and the UK have significant munitions to defend itself today, do you think?
The ammunition is a cruel one, yeah. So the numbers I have from the military is like 4 days in Germany and UK and 5 in France, which is 25% more, but it doesn't make a difference. And there are other facts which are just mind-boggling. So, for example, that with the new hypersonics, if they have a warhead, the reaction time of any US president is 12 minutes. Yeah, before and when the rockets weren't that fast, you had a way higher reaction time. So basically, there's a new reality that forces us to think more technologically about it. Or the other example, which I found very, very surprising to say the least, is even if you buy US fighter jets, so the way how it works is you are the owner. It stands somewhere in the hangar and you start flying. You have to put in the way where you want to fly. And then this data is sent to the US. And if they like it, the machine starts. If not, it doesn't start. So this is not exactly how a sovereign spirit works, I would guess.
Will we have nationalized or kind of continentalized security winners? And what I mean by that is Anduril wins the US, Helsing wins Europe, because you have this sovereignty of provider. Is that what will happen?
This will have a very big influence. Yeah, so that's why I, for example, also believe that a player like an ESA Aerospace, is a perfect situation for sovereignty investing. So the space will be a very, very big opportunity and a very crucial technology ecosystem to co-own, so to say. And think about it like the Starlink. So Starlink, if it can connect to a mobile device like Apple, theoretically the entire European telco industry would be obsolete. So, and if suddenly the self-driving cars are more dependent on low orbit satellites, do you think that in the competition between Tesla and the European car industry, we would have easy access to the Starlinks? And even if we wanted to have our own constellation, would we have easy priority on the transport on SpaceX into low orbit? So these are very, very fundamental technologies where we either left out or we have a very stringent plan how we get into those.
Talk to me about our ability to launch satellites.
Yeah, currently we either we get a slot in a SpaceX, with all the restrictions that there are, or we have Ariane, but Ariane base lastly sold 100% of their defense transport capacity to Amazon. So basically, as Europeans, we are for the time being not able to send own satellites at our own discretion whenever we want to.
For how many years?
6 years.
6 years. So do we just wait?
So, or speed up and build the next champions that guarantee us this technical sovereignty that we need in many fields.
It's not exactly chirpy listening, is it? I mean, like, what worries you most?
So what worries me most is that at some point we need a European unanimous view on what is important to us. And then we need to act on it, and then we need to support this. But this doesn't happen.
Do you think we know what's important to us? You know, Trump is consistently saying we need to spend a significantly higher portion of GDP on defense, and we need to start paying for defense ourselves. And we're going,
that's what I mean. That's what I mean. And you're perfectly right with this. And I think also in this case, I think Trump has a point, because it's pretty naive to think that everybody else pays and we don't need to pay. And it's even worse. So look, if you think about the German budget, not only didn't we pay 2%, but whatever we paid, or the 1.4, 60% of that is salaries and pensions. It's not that you buy equipment and become more able to defend yourself. It is conceptually wrong. So I think that's what coming back to the question, what worries me most is a very, very clear view. What do we need and execute on it?
Can you just help me understand? I always try and understand the other side of the argument. I always try and put myself in their shoes. Why are they thinking, no, we are right to limit defense spending, and it is in the best interests of the budget to prevent this expenditure?
Because the electorate doesn't give them benefit of the doubt. So the politicians fear they cannot win by doing that, historical, which was probably, they have some sympathy, because if everybody thinks we'll never have a war, then all the inhabitants of a country probably say, like, why do we invest in that if we will never have a war? So, but if they knew this is the ammunition level, this is the constant threat that we have, then you will have probably a very, very different view.
We have that now. We have Israel, Gaza, we have Russia, Ukraine. The ability for Putin to bluntly move into Lithuania, Belarus, surrounding nations is very real. So now is the time when the electorate would say, sure, let's increase defense spending, no?
Yes, and you still need to explain a little bit more. So funnily, as you see, Rheinmetall has become sponsor of Borussia Dortmund. So this is also done, this deal, in sync with the politicians to bring this topic in the midst of the population and make it visible to everybody. So I think there is this explanation that is currently happening.
Are the ministries of defense incentivized in the right way to purchase military equipment for best performance? What I mean by that is, if you try something new from Helsing, you could get fired if it doesn't work. But if you try something from Lockheed...
Yes, so you always have that. So you never get fired for buying IBM, right? So this is the mental thing. There are some advantages as facts, because you cannot get the equipment we bought in enough numbers, and the efficiency in the Ukraine shows that you have to buy other stuff. So there is a very clear way, so that people need to understand we need to get into a very different, let's say, asset class of defense equipment.
Can I ask, do you think it is realistic for us to move our percent spend of GDP from 2%, I believe it is now, to 3.5%? Is that a realistic ask?
There's an overview. I commissioned a study, so in which I analyzed all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and so I clearly came out that in terms of threat, historically, most of the European countries have spent in the vicinity of 3.5%. Poland is at 6 or 7. The Baltics are even higher, and Finland is also way higher. So this is actually not a crazy number. So, and I try to understand what are the repercussions if we went in as a German to 3.5%. Basically, that meant we had to spend 100 billion extra, roughly, right? So with all the economic theories, if you drop 100 billion into an economy, provided you can spend a lot of it in the home base, so let's say Germany or even Europe, then you immediately basically get back 80 to 110% of GDP effect. You would get 25-30% of immediate tax effect. Yeah, you get back, and you had something like 40% of household income. So if for a period of 4 or 5 years, the net effect on Germany, to put it a little bit polemically, if you ask the German electorate, do you want to be indebted with 63% of GDP and not able to defend yourself, or with 68, 69% after the 5 years, and you would be able to defend yourself? I think that's the ultimate question that we have to ask. And this is basically the choice that will be made in the next months.
If Trump says, hey, I'm not going to continue subsidizing your defense, good luck, what happens then?
What I described, we do have to come up with our own sovereignty. So that means investing now. If we can provide it fast enough, that's fine. If we can, probably there will have to be other options that...
On the 150 billion that we need to spend, the additional 100 billion, say we have that, say we move to that 3.5%, what's the right allocation of the extra 100 billion? How do we do that effectively?
Constraints, capacity constraints is the one, but you still need to have some of those. So that will be a fight for the scarce resources. And the others basically is along the efficiency. So you do have drones, and if you extrapolate the development, what will be happening there? You had like one drones, that got flight by one soldier, and then you have the next development will be swarms, and then you will have be attacking swarms and defending swarms, and so there is so much going on here that I think there has to be a little bit of foresight. Where does electronic warfare go? And then we have to equip ourselves to be efficient in that field. So this will probably be in the technical part of the equipment. And that is also why I do believe the chances for deep tech investors that have their good ties into the MODs have a fantastic chance now. Because if we think about 2% investment in defense of GDP, and 5% of that in basically in tech, buys us 50 billion demand from NATO member states in Europe. So if you think it's a 3 times revenue multiple, we're talking 150 billion market cap. If we do the same with 3.5% GDP and 10%, then we are at 150, 160 billion. And for more like 400, 500 billion market cap a year. So this is the chance where you would say from economic understanding, this is the reason why this is a very attractive field as investors to go into that.
How many investors in Europe do you feel are closely tied to MODs in the way that you mentioned there?
Currently, very few.
Yeah. Do you have to change your mindset as an investor when investing in such a different category? This is fundamentally different from enterprise SaaS investing.
Look, it's not that different. So technically, you have deep tech companies that have a superior sensor, that have a software. Instead of managing the operating system of an Android phone, it manages, like Auterion, the operating system of a drone. So you have very similar traits. You have one different customer, and who has a very special procurement process, which probably you have to learn a little bit. But that's basically at the beginning what is not so much the difference.
What do you find the hardest thing that we have to embrace as we think about spending the 100 billion effectively?
Well, you have to reinvent an ecosystem, and an ecosystem that basically hasn't ever worked together. So there are very few startups that ever worked with primes. There are very, very few startups that have worked with the MODs, and vice versa. So this has all to be reinvented. Everybody has to get to know each other. Everybody has to develop a certain level of trust. And the interesting way, what I'm currently thinking is, how does this ecosystem develop? What is the mature market? Is it a little bit like the pharma industry? Because the pharma industry, if you think about a Novartis, they are basically a gigantic organization if it comes to distribution and regulation, but not invention. So a big prime as Moloch in distributing, because they have years and years of lobbying into the MODs, and they're pretty good at regulation. Because if you want to sell something, you need to fill out 800 pages of what do I know. And they all have that. And startups will never have that to some extent. Only the big ones like the Helsings and the Andurils. So the question is, how many of the startups become sizable companies and become a prime in their own sense? Or will we have a market like a pharma market where you have basically a lot of innovation that gets accelerated through the cooperation with primes?
How do you think that plays out? And do you think there will be a new generation of primes where there are 10 Helsing-style companies of the world?
Too early to tell for me, because we are so early in the process that it still has to come.
Do the capital requirements fundamentally change, and does venture as a product need to change to fit this changing landscape? If you think about Helsing's first round or Angel's first round, I don't have the data, but I would imagine it is significantly more than a traditional seed or pre-seed round.
Look, of course. And not only if it's a pre-seed or pre-seed round, it's also, if you think the process through, has to be to some extent also at the growth capital stage. Because if the growth capital is always provided from the US, then basically you are abolishing your own sovereignty at that stage already again. Because then you have the influence in the boards, which then comes from the big investors, which might have at some point a different interest than as if it was a European one. So it's interesting to see. And the examples we have in the US might not be 100% transferable to Europe, because the US defense budget has like 14% R&D, which translates into 94 billion own R&D a year, which is a lot, and which is proprietary findings that then finds its way. In Europe, it's 4%, and so 9 billion. So the necessity, if it comes to embracing innovation, to cooperate with the VC world and VC-financed innovation is way, way higher in Europe than it is in the US even.
Wow. What are the biggest ways that we could make mistakes?
So this is a trust thing. And if there's this very fragile situation now that you have to sell into the MODs, you have to break the procurement processes as they are. And if protagonists get into the game that just do it because it's easy, or they perceive it's easy to raise a fund in defense, and then become active, there might be a risk that this fragile trust level there is jeopardized. So I think we do need, it's very important at the beginning, we are very serious and very sober and honest players in that field, so that we do not lose this beginning trust thing.
I remember speaking to Trey at Anduril, and I said, what did Anduril have that made you successful? And he said, oh, well, I know how to sell to governments. Palmer's a product genius. Matt Grimm's an operations expert. And then Brian Schimpf is a phenomenal CEO. And he's like, it's the unique combination of our team which makes us successful. And I've met many defense companies today as an investor, and they're a product expert, but they've got no idea how to sell to MODs, and they've got no CEO ability. My question being, do you agree with me that the biggest challenge is the unique skill set of founders to sell into this market effectively?
Oh, yes, of course. And basically, it is their gift, and they're fast-tracking the development of the ecosystem. Yeah. So basically, when I started with AOL in 1995, I was responsible for online banking, right? To bring online banking to the German banking landscape. There was nobody in German banks that wanted to do online banking. So there was no way how to sell online services into banks. So it is all a process. So as much as it is a process to do that now in MOD. So that is why the mission of the NATO Innovation Fund is bringing these trust levels. So because now people say, oh, we get financed, so we can start a dual-use company, which wasn't the case before. The entrepreneurs basically were left alone. And then, with the NATO, there are some people in the MODs that now are responsible to embrace early innovation and adopt it. So these processes need to be accelerated, and this is how the ecosystem will be developed.
Can I ask you, we've spoken a lot about defense. Defense is one huge area of expenditure for governments and for people, but another is health. And you actually led the investment in Neko, which is, I've spoke to Shaq obviously before and Daniel before. Can you just talk to me, why did you have such conviction on Neko? Because I remember when you did that deal, actually, Klaus, and you moved so fast. Just talk to me about that and how you came to move so fast on it when other people didn't.
So I think this is the entrepreneurial spirit, and basically it's a little bit the spirit that we can take very fast decisions in the organization. But I was on my way to Munich at that day, and I was discussing with Daniel for long, if he ever wanted to open it up, and so if he felt like he wanted to open it to investors. And at that moment, then I said, okay. He said, "Look, Klaus, I think I should open it up. I'm contemplating." I said, all good. So I changed the direction and didn't fly to Munich. I flew to Stockholm. I was 2 hours later in Stockholm, had my scan, went through everything, and I issued the term sheet the same evening. So and sometimes this has to do with total uncorrelated experiences you have. So I'm regularly going to Lanzerhof, which is a clinic in Germany where you have like precautionary examinations, and they talk with you about how important it is to have it in certain intervals. So not only have you all the parameters of your blood, but you also have it over the period of time so you can see it. So I basically was subconsciously trained for a situation like with Neko, where you had the same phenomenon with the moles, the skin examination, also with the blood. So that you have it over a certain period of time. And everything that I thought was very cool with the Lanzerhof, that you get like a report where they say, this is your number, this is the interval in which your number should be moved for a certain parameter, and then an explanation what too high and too low has cause and effects. So all this I thought was very, very cool for for way more people than we think. And people become more health sensitive. And that's why I implicitly felt there's a very, very big market. And as I'm always been a product guy, starting from AOL, and I fell in love with the product. And that was a very quick consideration.
Are you price sensitive, Klaus?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because the good things, I would still do them. The good companies I've invested in, even if they were 30% more expensive, and the shit I don't want to have admit it's worth 30% cheaper. So the beauty is I'm not in the buyout where buying makes a difference. I'm in the business where right judgment makes a difference. Yeah, and even if you misprice it at the beginning at 20-25%, it doesn't make a big difference at the end. And what people are always stuck on this valuation thing. And valuation is for me a hygienic thing. Because the first hygiene factor is if the founder tells me a decent price, and a decent price is interesting. If he's too expensive, I think, what the heck did you smoke? Yeah. And if it's too cheap, then he said, look, you don't understand what it is, because at the end it is a pact that we both do, which honors everything I've done in my life as an entrepreneur, the aspiration and the perceived execution skills. And this is the result of that is the price. And this is, you can have a confidence interval around it, but that's not rocket science.
So do you care about ownership, or is it percent of cash deployed from you?
This is a typical fund question.
We
Yeah.
just see so many focus around ownership, and especially, the joys of podcasting is you can refill.
I do think that you need to have ownership in that sense that some of the crypto funds that I'm seeing, they invest many companies, very, very small sums, so it never makes a difference if you're right. So you need to make sure that it makes a difference if you're right. So, and the reason why I sometimes argue this is, look, I feel I'm an outsourced business development guy. So I have a certain number of hours available to help you. And I need to make sure that the compensation level, as it should be right on your side, must be right on our side as well. So, and that's basically how you come up with finding a common sensitivity to agree on.
Can I dive into a couple of companies? We mentioned Daniel calling you and you flying to Stockholm. How did you come to be an early investor in Spotify?
So I was lucky to be investor in Stardol, which was led by Matthias Miksche, a great entrepreneur in Stockholm. And Daniel was CTO there. And we got to know each other. And obviously there was, for sure, a unilateral appreciation for him, but obviously also a reciprocal one. So, and then at some point when he started Spotify, he asked me whether I would be willing to be on board again.
Was it an easy yes? It was not an obvious company at the point. It was dealing with music rights, intense IP challenges. This was not like an obviously easy company to build.
But look, I mean, all the big ones I invested in were not obvious ones. So you could say when the time I was looking at Spotify, it was, I'm not sure, I wouldn't say it's illegal, but we had music and we didn't have the rights. Yeah. So at the time when I invested in Skype, there was no business model because with Skype out wasn't even invented. Yeah. At the time when I invested in Airbnb, it was also very, very early. So
how did you come to be in Airbnb? You're in Germany, in Europe. How did that come to be?
So it's a lot of luck. So in these situations. So in the case of Airbnb, it was a discussion I had with Guy Oziri, who's the manager of Madonna. And we were chatting, and he basically was advertising it so heavily and tried to convince me. And I think at the end I followed his logic, and then luckily I made that decision.
Okay, so we have that. Tell me, what about Revolut?
Yes, Revolut is I think it's the biggest blessing that we have in the European ecosystem currently as a company. And we basically missed it in the UK team at the time. And I still remember then that my son came along and said, "Look, I found this cool app." Yeah, and he was raving about it with his friends at the dinner table. Yeah, and I looked at it, and with my product affinity, I said, "Wow, is this cool?" And then I just ordered. Yeah, literally, I ordered the team to get into that cap table. And this was a very short one.
Well done, team. I mean, it's impressive. Okay, so we have that. Another one. You got into Meta, or Facebook at the time. How did that happen? And when we were chatting before, you walked me through kind of why it was exciting for you. Talk to me about getting into Facebook when you did.
I was following the social media stuff, as there was a company called Xing in Germany, and there was like Friendster, and then you had like MySpace. And it was fascinating that Friendster, being like the sort of first social media, the only thing they basically invented is I could see through whom I know somebody else, the 6 or 7 degrees of what knowing each other. So, and then suddenly MySpace came and they just added music to it. And the whole herd moved away from Friendster to MySpace. And suddenly MySpace was the hottest thing on earth. And then Facebook came along and suddenly introduced like clear names, so voyeurism, right? So, and then everybody moved there. And so until then, I did not feel that there was one single argument why the value was captured. And then they announced that they were willing to introduce the API. And at that moment, I said, Jesus, if that's the API, then all the music or all the innovation is easier to happen within Facebook because you take advantage of the network and don't need to build the network again. And then the value will stay. And at that time, I needed to figure out how I get into it. And then I, for 2 months, called everybody I knew in the valley. And I ended up with Matt Kohler, like a little coincidence, because I was at Benchmark as a VC, and he was with Benchmark, and so that was established the connection. And then I bought some shares that he could organize. And yeah, thanks, Matt, by the way.
The commonality amongst these, when I hear them, is these are not rounds happening. This is in between in a lot of cases, very serendipitous events. Is that how it's worked when you reflect on it?
Pardon?
Is that the commonality when you reflect on the winners that you've had? They are all tweener rounds, making something happen when a round does not exist.
Yeah, so look, I mean, it's a little bit like a personality. So if I want to have it, I want to have it now. Yeah, so, and then you try to preempt it. So, and in these times, what the examples I was saying, that was the market was not in the same professional state as it is now. So there was always room for like cowboys like me that try to get into some situations in a different way.
You did cred in India, not a very similar market at all, completely different really to the European and the US market. Why and how?
So look, fintech is good. Yeah, I like fintech. And I was always working with Shailandra Singh from Sequoia in the Indian market. So, and we looked at it together, and he was so kind to help me getting into it. And very early innings, and I backed also Kunal Shah's company he had before. And so he was happy to have me again on his cap table.
Amazing companies there. Sadly, it can't be all winners. And, you know, sometimes we make the wrong decision. When you think about your biggest loss, what was your biggest loss and how did that shape your mindset?
It's also a mentality thing. Yeah? So I come from that area in Germany called Cologne, Bonn, and Düsseldorf, who are very easygoing people. Yeah? So they have like a little bit like, I would say they're like the Dalai Lama. Sometimes it's good if you get what you want, and something is good when you don't get what you want. And I have felt that in a lot of cases, even if you don't get what you want, it turns out well, and it's for a good reason. Yeah. So I still remember, being son of a farmer, I didn't have a clue about anything what I wanted to do in life, and that didn't so much change after my studies. So I thought, that'd be cool to be as Goldman or McKinsey or BCG or Morgan Stanley. And I applied several times everywhere, but they never wanted to give me a job. So so kudos to their smart H&R departments, because I would have been a terrible employee. But so it was clearly not what I wanted. But in hindsight, it was, the savior of my life. Yeah. So otherwise, it would have been way worse. And it's the same with companies. So my biggest nightmare, I wouldn't say, but at that time it was a pretty nightmare, was a company called Wunderloop, where basically I worked with a friend of mine like 3.5 years just to lose 60% of my wealth. Yeah, and the market wasn't mature enough for it. I was a little bit too early. It was a cookie-based advertising platform that was probably like 1 to 2 years too early. But during the process, I got to know somebody who wanted to buy this company, but at the end didn't. So we then hit it off and thought he was half Turkish, half German. We decided to found Makafoni together, a company in Turkey that we sold for 150 million 2.5 years later to Naspers. So it overcompensated the loss of that one company. So I'm a big believer, if you are ethical in the things you do and you're friendly, then luck comes to you and you can make a positive thing also from a lot of losses.
Can I ask you, when you look back at winners that became losses, how do you think about when to sell? So, for example, I was in Clubhouse, I was in Hopin, I was in Be Real, Klaus, all of these I could have sold for 20, 30x.
Look, everybody has that. So be cool, everybody has that. There's a common trait with all the entrepreneurs and investors. So I got in at King.com at 2.5 million and sold something at 100, and I could have sold at 5 billion. So I didn't do it, obviously. So basically
Is that the one you think about most?
No, I don't think about it. Yeah. So I think at the time this was still an arguable call, because Candy Crush didn't even exist. It was a very different company at the time. Yeah. So, but it's a fantastic team, and they deserve very much to be so successful as they were, or as they are. So I'm totally relaxed. It is a little bit like a certain number of criticism that you get. If you don't get it, you're not there.
Final one before we do a quick fire. And I hope it's okay for me to ask personal, but you have incredibly hardworking, ambitious children. Like, I know them. And respectfully, it is quite hard to bring up children in affluent families, to have that hunger, ambition, work ethic. What's the secret?
Look, at the beginning, it hasn't been like that, very affluent. So the beginnings weren't that glorious. It was a long journey to get where we are now. And we had a very normal and very tight family life. So I very consciously decided to be basically, during the 2000s, at home at 5-ish, 6. Yeah, and then we had supper, then we did homework, and then I brought them to bed. And then at 9, I sat down at the desk again. So this was a very conscious decision. Yeah, if it is unilaterally explains, why this is the outcome. Now I think there has been a lot of very valuable input. My then wife was giving to the kids, then the love and the home that she created. So this is probably everything working together there.
You talk about work a lot with them.
Yeah.
Is that important?
Oh, yes. So they all got the same the grandma test. So they have some exposure, and that's the best way to see if they like what they can experience. So now, look, it's a very open discussion I have with them.
Listen, I want to move into a quick fire round. So I say a short statement, and you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. So which venture investor do you most respect and learn from, and why?
I think Lee Fixel is a very cool guy. So when he was at Tiger, so he was in Mercado Libre, he was in Yandex, he was in Flipkart, and it was a one-man show on the plane, starting there with 28, 29. This is an amazing achievement. Also, the way he applied thoughts to conquering markets, very, very very, very impressive.
He is also an LP in 20VC. Lovely, fantastic guy. Biggest lesson from working with Daniel Ek for many years?
Crazy persistence and patience. Things at least 2 levels more profound than others. It's very logical and is always a very friendly and well-rounded character. Yeah, and he has uncompromising ethics in everything he does. Very important to me.
The funny thing for me is I actually saw a video of him the other day and I didn't recognize him. It was like from 15 years ago of him starting Spotify. And like the incredibly fit Daniel today is very different to the Daniel that started. It's like, wow, age has been kind to you, Daniel. He's a fantastic guy. So single best performing investment by multiple.
Yeah, if investment defined as the returns delivered, then I would say every single cent I invested in any of my 4 kids. Multiple is not measurable. Yeah, but if you want to, as I said, I have a different coordinate system with that. But if, for what it's worth, if you insist, I have something like 6, 7 investment more than 100 times money, one even 1,000 times, and some more like 6 or so in the range of 30 to 60 times money. So it is, but this is not the currency. The very nicest currency I have to tell you is I have some very, very crazy cool thank you emails from the best founders worldwide that say, thank you for your help. You kept your promise and made an impact on my journey. So this is what makes you proud. This is when you sit, when you are 80, you sit in front of the chimney and with a glass of wine. Yeah, and then you say, this is what you have lived for. You didn't live for 6 or 8 percentage numbers of funds. That doesn't matter at the end. It is more like the impact that you made for people.
The heaviest things in life are not iron or gold, but unmade decisions. Which unmade decision weighs on your mind most? It's
a little bit like said. That's not how I think about it. It's a little bit what we just discussed with the Dalai Lama thing. I'm fatalistic about it. So everything that I thought was bad, or a lot of things that I thought were bad turned out to be good, and a lot of things that I thought were good turned out to be bad. So time will tell. So I'm easy on that.
If you are an ambitious entrepreneur wanting to build a company, do you build it in Europe today?
You still can, I would say. First of all, also because yes, you are an ambitious entrepreneur, but it's not everything in life. Yeah, so you are also a human being. You have friends, you have family. So I think it is sometimes an equilibrium in life and not a single parameter that needs to be optimized. Yeah.
The Americans say like, oh, the Europeans, they just don't work very hard. You're like, morons. Not true? Or you like, actually, our work ethic is generally much lower?
I think it is more nuanced. So I think on the very top of the pyramid, it's exactly the same. People fight like maniacs, and there is everything that you do in order to get somewhere. But I think the broader base under the bell curve is more complacent, more entitled. You have more discussions on this crazy woke shit, and on ESG and what do I know. This is not that some that you see it in different geos.
I absolutely. That's too funny. I love the crazy woke shit. I also love here. I mean, I said to you, which investor would you swap portfolios with today? That's your comment. What's your comment, Klaus?
I said, if you saw my portfolio, you wouldn't have asked that question.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't see the portfolio before, so I'm happy to put a pin in that one. I do want to ask, though, you incredibly successful angel turned venture investor. What element of being an angel do you miss out most? That's from Shaq.
So I know I would have guessed this from Shaq because we have this discussion very often, and there are clear advantages of being an angel. So you are very free. You do not need to do fundraising. Yeah. So you basically so the decision takes as long as you want to. But you always die one death. Yeah, so meaning a platform has also something interesting, and you can achieve something with a platform that you cannot achieve as an angel. So, and I think there's a right time for being the one or the other. So I think Mark Evans, whom I admire a lot, he was spectacular good at benchmark, but afterwards now even better as an angel. So I think maybe everything has its time.
Mark is incredibly special, also incredibly behind the scenes. The man does not even have LinkedIn.
That's what I mean with social media.
Unbelievable. Will Neko be bigger than Spotify?
I believe that there's a very, very high chance it becomes super big for a very reason. So you have the execution skills that are unparalleled and proven. And the markets are so much bigger if it comes to health. So at the end, music is not a big market. It's an okay market, but it's not a monster big market. And as Daniel said last, that the sum of what the US spends on heart diseases and medication, all that kind of stuff in the US is in the vicinity of Apple's revenue worldwide. So that means if you are moderately successful, the size is so much bigger. And I do think that with the product we have currently at Neko, with the ideas that Daniel, Hjalmar, and the team have, there is a very high chance that they will absolutely smack it.
Final one for you. What question are you not often asked that you think you should be asked more, Klaus?
Yes, that's an interesting one, because everybody asks me very factual things and geared short term. There are very few people that sit down and say, look, I'm doing a journey for like 10 years. So, and what makes me happy over a period of 10 years? Because there will be some fatigue moments from the normal work, or what did you make what do you individually make out of it? Because happiness can have many facets, and just being successful and 8 times divorced is also not the ideal dream of a happiness, right? So it is not only factual things, it's a lot of things of what makes you proud, what were the moments, how should I design my life? So this is things that I always ask. So I think it is a very great luxury if I can have some friends that are 10, 15 years older that have mastered the next 10-year period in terms of prioritizing the pros and cons and the important ones.
A weird one. Everyone always does that. I'll be happy when I have X, or when I do Y, or when something is achieved. For me, I'll be happy when I have a personal track record like this.
There are 2 things that would make me happy, and that's the final word then. I need to be proud of my 8-year-old me, what I have achieved and what I've dreamt of, and proud of my 80-year-old me. When I look back and say, how have I have shown integrity with the people I've worked with, integrity with my partner, with my family. So these are the 2 things that are the North Stars for making me happy.
Klaus, listen, I so appreciate the incredible discussion today. Thank you for joining me, and it's so good to do it in person.
Thank you.